Welcome to this webinar where we're going to launch our new Student Information and Administration System that we've named FACES. You'd be familiar with the word FACES because it builds on the work that we've been doing for some time now with Lynn Sharrett on FACES on the data. It's a fantastic initiative that's really taken hold in a big way across all our schools. And of course behind FACES on the data is that tangible commitment to our strategic intent, which is improving the learning of every student and making sure our teachers have professionally rewarding working lives. Now, to do that, we need to put in support for both the student and for the teacher. And that's what this software is about, and that's what FACES will do across our systems. It's about looking at how we capture, monitor, support and share. We capture the data that we need, we then monitor the data we have. Most importantly then, that we support the school communities as they use that data and add to the data that they have. And then finally that we share the data so that we can celebrate the achievement that we have. You know as well as I do that we've committed to personalise the learning of every student, and this is the sort of software that you need to have in place so that we can do that. Added to that, we need great teachers teaching. This is the sort of software that will help them do that. The central change is that it will replace our existing eSchool admin and data process, and we will now move from individual school capability to a system capability, and that's the central message in here, that at last we have a way of dealing with this collectively as a system, because that's what we have the responsibility to ensure that every student in every one of our schools experience an improvement for the business of coming to our schools. I'd like to thank all those who are involved, for John DeCourse in his leadership of the overall project, to Mark Ryan, Ron Van Vliet, Frank Caristo, who've worked on this project in the office, and most importantly to our pilot schools, those schools that put up their hands early and said, yes, we want to do this because we know it'll make a difference and we want to do something for our colleagues. And it's in that spirit, I think, that we can look forward to great outcomes for FACES.
And welcome everyone to this webinar about the new Student Information System. The purpose of this webinar is really threefold: to provide you with a brief update about progress on the project this year, to give you an overview of the implementation process in your schools in 2014, and to provide a brief walkthrough of the application. Just a few housekeeping things first. During this webinar you'll be able to ask questions via the online chat, and we'll endeavour to answer those during the session or post the answers online for you to read later. To ask a question, simply click the chat icon on the bottom right of your screen. Then click in the chat dialog box, type in your school name, then type in your question. You'll see the questions that anybody else asks, and you'll also see any of the answers that are posted. Lastly, the webinar will be recorded and available for viewing online later through Oscar. So let's get started. So, FACES, our new student information system. Some of you may know this previously being called Starbase SIS Express. Well, it's now been renamed. As Greg mentioned, it's essentially an eSchool administration replacement, and we're partnering with SingleView for the implementation process. This implementation is really a vanilla process. That means very little development. It's basically the application out of the box. And as Greg also suggested, one of the significant changes is rather than having 78 standalone systems in our schools, this is an enterprise or centralised system. So what does this mean? Even though it's an eSchool replacement, it actually provides a lot of benefits over eSchool. First thing, data has always been owned by the school, whereas FACES, an enterprise system, it's system data. In eSchool, you need an application installed on your computer to access it, but in FACES, access it with a browser. eSchool, the only people who really log in, the school support officers, whereas with FACES, all staff can log in, anytime, any place. eSchool focused on demographic data about students. While that's also contained in FACES, it also includes learning information, welfare, timetable, and lots of other data. The reports in eSchool are really quite limited and only accessible by the school support officer, whereas the reports in FACES are flexible, powerful, and anybody can access and manipulate the reports. In eSchool there were 78 instances, often resulting in multiple student identities as students transferred from school to school. In FACES there's one instance, As the student transfers, there's no need to re-enroll them or type in any more data. Simply move them from one school to another and all their data comes across with them. And lastly, eSchool was integrated minimally with other systems, whereas FACES will integrate with Connex for staff information, IGM for identities, Schools Node for various roles in the school, and a number of timetable packages. So why call it FACES? Well, as Greg said, it's really about putting faces on the data. It's about getting a holistic picture of each individual learner, not just the demographic information, but all the elements of learning that make them into an individual. It's about providing tools to ensure that learning, teaching, and teacher learning are informed by good data and evidence. And lastly, it's about ensuring the data about students is accurate and accessible and all in one place. So what's in FACES? Well, there's a number of different modules. There's an enrolment module, there's student administration, there's attendance. Timetable and Markbook we're also implementing, although there are some caveats on that because it's quite a US-based system, so there's still a bit of work to be done in customising those for Australian conditions. And lastly, student services to replace their ageing FileMaker database will also be present in FACES. Some of the data, this might be a bit hard to read on your screen, but all the ones that are in black are things that are currently in eSchool, so demographic and context, medical information, additional needs, identities, transport, ESL, whereas all the ones in red are the additional ones that are available in the FACES, so learning plans, alerts, awards, activities, documents, scholarships, injuries, and much, much more. Timelines. By January 2014, Phase 1, roll out to 5 pilot schools. Then during the remainder of 2014 and perhaps early into 2015, rolling out to most remaining schools. At some point during the rollout process, we'll also be exploring Phase 3, the additional functionality. So Phase 1, what have we been doing? In March, we had a discovery session, which is really about exploring the application. In May, we had a training session, so that was really about getting us up to speed with using the system. July was spent doing our user acceptance testing. In other words, testing the system, the data that we've migrated to ensure that it met our requirements. September and October, which we've just finished, we've been in pilot, doing training at the pilot schools and follow-up support with them. And then January 2014, the 5 schools involved in the pilot, that's Marion, Patrician Brothers, Cerdon, Bede Paulding and St Angela's, will all go live. Some of the other activities, because it's a US-based product, there's been a fair degree of localization and customization, so it would suit our particular requirements. We've been setting up security so multiple users can log in and only see the things that they need to be able to see. Integrating, as we mentioned before, with Connex, with Timetable, with IDM. Training resources, building reports, developing processes and procedures, configuring the system, and building the hardware and the environments. So it's been a fairly busy Phase 1. We're relying on input from schools to give some advice about what some additional functionality is really required. Perhaps it's around Markbook, perhaps it's online enrolment, could be calendaring, resource booking, alerts and notifications. We already have a long list and we'll be talking to schools about what else we'll be adding to the system. So on to the important part, which is really about the Phase 2 rollout. What's happening in your school in 2014? The schedule we've organised, the schedule we've planned, is to roll out to 6 to 8 schools every 3 to 4 weeks. And by rollout, we mean data migration, we mean training, we mean configuration, and we mean ongoing support. Each school would have a SIS implementation team or an SIT to support in this process. And we'll also ensure that there'll be some ongoing and timely role and activity-based training opportunities. For example, there's no use in training someone about how to do rollover in February, but because by the time they get to the end of the year, they will have forgotten how to do it. So indicative timelines, first session might be first group might be 1 secondary school and 7 primaries, then term 2, another secondary and 5 primaries, term 2, week 4, and so it goes on throughout the year. The actual process goes beyond the 3 weeks. About 8 weeks prior to implementation, we'll be having a group overview or probably another webinar to explain the actual processes, and we'll also get schools to nominate who's going to be in their SIT. 6 weeks prior, or in the 6 weeks prior, we'll be doing a number of planning meetings. We'll talk about data gathering and cleansing, we'll talk about training plans and scheduling, and we'll be exploring what other processes and applications the school already has in place. Week 1 of implementation is when we're actually doing the data migration and validation, the configuration and finalising the planning. Week 2 will be training. That's 3 days for the SIT at a central location, and on day 4 they'll be going live. And week 3 will be on-site support from the trainers within the schools and doing localised training for other staff. Post-implementation, of course, there'll be help desk support and lots of ongoing training activities. So a little bit more about the SIT, the School Implementation Team. They're really responsible for the implementation and training coordination within the school. Also for some of the ongoing management and configuration. We envisage these teams consisting of 3 to 4 staff, at least one school support officer, preferably the enrolment officer, as that's one of the major modules within the application. At least one teacher or AP or coordinator role, someone who's really going to be able to drive how the system focuses on curriculum and pedagogy, and 1 to 2 others at the school's discretion. We'll provide 6 release days for the 3 days training. The school will then provide any other release days for additional people that need to come to the training. Some of the basic principles in Phase 2. All data will be migrated from eSchool to FACES. At Go Live, FACES becomes a single source of truth for student information. eSchool will actually be still available, but it'll be read-only, so you won't be able to update any information within eSchool. We'll be assisting schools by identifying school processes and systems that are currently in place and looking for opportunities for replacement or integration. We'll also try and organise some customised training to support the functionality which is really a focus in your particular school. We hope to provide some flexible implementation timelines, but it will happen in all schools eventually. Governance is ultimately responsible for approving any development or integration effort with existing processes or systems or any variations to this timeline. Just a note on attendance. The significant benefits in using attendance within FACES. For those schools that are using paper role-based attendance, nice and easy. Once you go live, you can simply start entering attendance from your paper-based roles into FACES instead of eSchool. For those schools that are using electronic attendance options, we'll be exploring a number of different options for how we migrate that data to FACES. For those schools doing Roll Marker have offered a 6-month or 12-month contracts with a 90-day notification period. So you might like to keep those timeframes in mind when you're thinking about your implementation dates. And on to implementation dates. On OSCAR, you'll find a lot more information. Just do a search for Student Information System or SIS. But one of the parts in OSCAR is the implementation schedule. And on there you'll find a link to an online Google spreadsheet about nominating your implementation dates. There's also a section here about school timetables, provide some guidelines and some naming conventions which will really assist when we're doing the implementation of timetable. Some of the guidelines around nominations. Schools, you get the opportunity to nominate your preferred dates and also any undesirable dates. It's on a first in, first served basis, so get in early. The groups will roughly consist of 1 to 2 secondary schools and hopefully the feeder primary schools, and there's certainly some benefits to grouping with nearby schools, and you'll be able to see other schools that have actually nominated their dates, so you can select schools which are nearby. One of the primary benefits of this is for training, because it'll be a central venue, so if you're all close, then there'll be much less travelling involved. It'll also make it a little bit easier with pre-enrolled or Year J students. Alright, so that's an overview of the application, an overview of the processes, an overview of what we've been doing so far. So let's take a little bit of time to do a bit of a guided tour of what's actually in FACES and what it looks like. Hi, and welcome to FACES, the new student information system for Parramatta Diocesan Schools. This short screencast will provide a brief tour of the application, showcasing some of the features. When you first log into FACES, you will be presented with a dashboard screen which contains a number of portlets. Different users will see different sets of portlets. These portlets provide access to different functions or tasks in FACES. One of the most frequently used is the Student Search portlet. We could search for an individual student from this screen, but by clicking the Go button on this portlet, we will be able to work with multiple students. This screen is one of the most common ways of seeing information in the application, the Interactive Report or IR, where student information is displayed in numerous columns. These interactive reports appear throughout the application and can easily be customised to get exactly the right information. We can see that this interactive report is filtered to show students from Marion College for the 2013 year. We can also see a series of icons beneath the alerts column. These provide important medical, disciplinary or general notes and alerts for that student. We can easily sort by columns. Here I'll sort on date of birth in ascending order. We can remove columns. Here I'll remove the alerts column. We can filter on columns, so I'll filter the homeroom column to show students from one particular class. And we can add extra columns. In this example I'll add the age and the house column. And while I'm here, I'll hide a few other columns. We can also show more than the default list of 10 students. Once we have the data we require, then it is a simple process to export the data to Excel or schedule the report to be emailed to your inbox on a regular basis. When we go into the details for a student, we can see the range of information which is available, including demographic information such as the student identifier, the date of birth, age and gender, the student locator which shows the current class, teacher and room from the student's timetable, additional needs information, mode of transport to and from school including bus routes, auxiliary data which includes language and visa information, ESL background, tracking of community service hours, medical information, privacy and publication permission, test records such as NAPLAN, early years assessment, MAI and so on, including test data from previous years and other schools, and much more. FACES also manages student attendance. At the teacher's dashboard, teachers can click on the homeroom and take daily attendance. This then appears in the student locator and in the student's daily attendance records. Student lists are another useful feature, which enables users to easily create and work with groups of students such as sporting teams or those on a particular bus route. These lists then make it very simple to do bulk processes, such as tracking involvement in activities or posting partial absences for students on a late bus. The Discipline module allows teachers to create referrals which then appear on the dashboard of principals or coordinators for further action. While the medical injury task allows teachers to post injury reports, which can then be seen by the first aid officer. These are just some of the features of FACES. There are many more which you will explore when it is rolled out to your school in 2014. And now some reflections and comments from some of the participants at the pilot schools.
I think the most powerful feature is the ability to have access to the information of all the students in the diocese. So the accuracy of the information will be a lot greater because you're only entering the data once.
The possibility of finding children straight away, you know where they are, what class they're in, what area of the school they're in at any given time of the day.
It's the fact that if we're transferring a student, we all share the one information, so we don't have to input that data again. It's there. We just transfer them from one school to another.
It's the fact that everything is in the one location, it's user-friendly, and it's quite self-explanatory.
A feature of SIS would be the fact that it's web-enabled and that data is only input into the system once rather than 78 or 80 schools at a time.
Having all the data in one place about every student is going to make it a lot easier. You'll be able to look up one thing, all the information will be there, and that will make it so much easier for everyone.
I think schools will quite happily embrace the new product.
So that ends the webinar. Thank you very much for your time and your participation. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email either Frank Caristo or myself. We'll endeavour to get those back. And also check back frequently on Oscar, and you'll find there that there'll be some links to some other FAQs and other training resources. Thank you very much for your time. Bye.